Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a historical paradox that really kind of defies common understanding. Imagine a brilliant Renaissance philosopher, a guy who crisscrossed Europe, challenging the intellectual and religious titans of his day, only to be burned at the stake in 1600. But here's the twist, the thing that makes his story so much more than just, religious persecution. His demise appears, while inextricably linked to the hidden mechanisms behind the downfall of powerful financial empires, and maybe even the unveiling of hidden ancient knowledge, stuff that could have reshaped the world.
It's a really profound journey we're embarking on here. We're about to uncover a world far more interconnected and, dare I say, conspiratorial than what the history books usually tell us. Today's deep dive is inspired by Joseph P. Farrell's truly insightful work, Financial Vipers of Venice, Alchemical Money, Magical Physics, and Banking in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Oh, it's a book that masterfully peels back layers of history to reveal these hidden forces and ideas that shaped finance, religion, and power from, well, ancient times right through the Renaissance. It challenges some really fundamental assumptions about how our modern world was built.
And Farrell doesn't shy away from connecting those seemingly disparate threads, does he? He brings together, an astounding array of sources. Everything from ancient historical texts and dense economic analyses to theological treatises and even forgotten maps, cartography. So our mission today is to kind of extract the core insights from this intellectual goldmine, to connect these seemingly unrelated historical threads, and ultimately to understand why certain revolutionary ideas were so violently suppressed, while others were, covertly leveraged for immense power and wealth.
Exactly. And you should think of this as a journey into the very origins of our modern financial systems, the corporate structures we interact with daily, and even maybe the geopolitical strategies that define our world today. You're going to have some serious aha moments, I think, about how deeply embedded certain historical patterns are in our present reality. It's about understanding the why behind the headlines you see every morning, and perhaps even the hidden forces at play in our own economy.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our first major figure, Giordano Bruno. Many might recognize him as, a radical Renaissance thinker, a martyr burned at the stake in Rome, 1600. But his story, as Farrell presents it, is just so much more complex than a simple heresy trial. It really begs the question, what was so uniquely threatening about him?
Absolutely. Bruno's journey was, well, remarkable and controversial
Yeah.
right from the start. He wasn't one to shy away from intellectual confrontation, that's for sure. He traveled extensively throughout Europe, France, Geneva, London, Oxford, Germany, Bohemia, then back to his native Italy. And everywhere he went, he managed to anger a really wide array of powerful figures and institutions. We're talking about the Anglican dons of Oxford, the Puritans of Cambridge, the Calvinists of Geneva, the Lutherans of Germany, and of course the dominant Catholics in France and Italy. It's quite an achievement, really, to unite such diverse opposition against yourself.
It's striking, isn't it? How universally disliked his ideas were among the established powers. The source suggests his philosophy brought both Venice and the Vatican perilously close to losing not just power, but centuries of status and standing. That's a huge claim. But here's the really baffling part, the mystery of his accusation. He was accused of atheism in England, yet he defended theism in Germany. That contradiction is key, right? Because it tells us it wasn't really about atheism or theism in the way we usually think about it. So this raises the important question. What exactly was so fundamentally threatening about his philosophy that it got such fierce and seemingly contradictory opposition across the whole religious and political spectrum?
That contradiction is absolutely the heart of the mystery. It wasn't just some, simple theological dispute. To understand Bruno's true threat, we need to dive into a core concept he championed, a really profound philosophical wellspring he drew from. Farrell calls it the ancient topological metaphor of the medium. It's an idea rooted in ancient thought, describing the fundamental nature of reality itself, and Bruno's interpretation of it was, well, nothing short of revolutionary.
Okay, to grasp this, let's start with a surprisingly simple yet profound idea from mathematics. It's called the no thing, symbolized by awe, as described by mathematician George Spencer Brown. Imagine a perfectly blank canvas, right? A void of pure, undifferentiated potential, absolutely nothing defined. Just an indescribable, infinitely extended space, completely devoid of any distinguishing features.
Right. And then, within this no thing, you perform one simple act, drawing a distinction. It could be just a single line, anything. But that line instantly cleaves the space. It creates two interiors. Let's call them A1 and E2 on a common surface where they meet, denoted by the area gear 2. So what you've just done from absolute nothingness is create a 1-3, a kind of primordial trinity, like the very blueprint of creation itself.
And what's crucial here, the key point, is that the signature of that original no-thing, that fundamental void, remains imprinted in all subsequent differentiations. It's like a fractal, isn't it? Where the original blueprint is echoed in every new layer of complexity. This forms what we can call an analogical calculus, something connecting all generated entities, no matter how complex or differentiated they become. It's a universal pattern of emergence, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. And this concept, abstract as it might sound right now, has really deep roots in ancient traditions across different cultures. In the Vedic texts, specifically the Padma Purana, you see a striking parallel in the Hindu Trinity. Vishnu, the preserver, self-differentiates into Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Here, Vishnu, in his role as preserver and sustainer, acts as that common surface, the unifying principle, uniting the opposites of creation and destruction. And this self-differentiation gives rise to fundamental categories: nature, functions, even persons. It's like the cosmic dance of becoming.
And it's not just the Vedas, right? The Corpus Hermeticum, those mysterious ancient texts rediscovered in the Renaissance, they also express this trinity, though with different terms: God, space, and cosmos. In this formulation, space serves as the common surface, the unifying principle, linking the divine and the material cosmos. It's the medium through which creation happens.
And a key Hermetic principle that comes directly out of this metaphor is this emphasis on fecundity and plenitude. It talks about an ingenerate but creative principle, and original fecundity inherent in the properties of matter. This leads, the text suggests, to a continuous production of a surplus of information without debt. Now, this is a truly crucial philosophical point for Bruno. It suggests a universe that is inherently self-generating, abundant, constantly creating new value without needing some external source or incurring any fundamental obligation or debt.
Okay, now here's where Giordano Bruno becomes truly radical, and why he posed such a monumental threat. He took this Hermetic metaphor and just ran with its implications in a way that directly challenged the status quo of both religious and financial power. For Bruno, man himself is not simply a creature, but the boundary condition or common surface between the sensible world, or physical reality, and the intelligible world, the realm of divine ideas and universal principles.
And that is profound because it shifts the locus of divine connection. It moves it away from an external mediated authority, like the church, inward to the individual. For Bruno, law isn't some external decree imposed by a king or a church. It's an interior illumination within individuals, a direct understanding of divine order. And this naturally leads to the revolutionary concept of the sovereignty of the individual person, where each human being possesses this inherent capacity for moral and spiritual self-governance. This was, well, dynamite in a time of absolute monarchies and papal authority.
And he didn't stop there. Bruno explicitly stated that Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, is mutable, changeable, just one of many gods, really a manifestation of human passions and contradictions. He believed it was by the grace of the gods that man is permitted to make them serve us, to take and accommodate them at our convenience and pleasure. Now, that fundamentally challenges religious authority, doesn't it? Particularly the papacy's claim to be the sole interpreter of a revealed, immutable God and their absolute control over salvation. I mean, if man can accommodate the gods to his pleasure, where does that leave the church's power?
Indeed. And if nature reveals itself directly, if individuals have this interior illumination, then there's no need for positive or special revelation mediated by priests or scriptures, is there? And if man is a co-creator with God, as Bruno argued, then he's not fundamentally indebted to an external power or entity for his existence or salvation. He is a source of creation himself.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting for the financial powers of the day. If humanity is inherently creative, abundant, and not fundamentally in debt, what does that do to systems built on the idea of inherited debt, divine obligation, and scarcity? It's a direct philosophical attack on the very foundations of certain economic models. If creation can happen without debt, then the entire structure of lending and interest, which were, the lifeblood of emerging banking systems, comes into question.
And Bruno tied this cosmological philosophy directly to his practical methods. His ars memoria, the art of memory, wasn't just a mnemonic device for remembering lists or speeches like we might think of it. In his Hermetic cosmology, it was a profound way to tap into and direct the operations of nature. It was a method to impress divine organization onto the human psyche itself, to access the powers of the cosmos, which are in man himself. It was a practical path, he believed, to unlock human potential in alignment with cosmic principles.
He called this natural magic, and even mathematical magic. It sounds similar to ceremonial magic, maybe, but with the formal explicitness of mathematics, almost like a higher-order mathematical language, akin to topology. The source makes a very strong statement here. Bruno's art of memory is his religious revolution. It wasn't just a technique, it was a complete system for reordering human consciousness to align with cosmic principles and therefore exert influence over the natural world and, crucially, over one's own destiny, independent of external powers.
So if we put all of Bruno's ideas together, the existential threat he posed to both religious and financial powers becomes crystal clear. On the religious front, his claims that the Hermetica, this ancient non-Christian tradition, was older than Moses, that man was co-creator, that there was no need for external revelation, and that Yahweh himself was mutable. Well, that directly undermined the papacy's absolute authority. Their entire legitimacy, based on revealed religion and its sacramental sacrificial system, was under attack.
And on the financial side, that Hermetic principle of fecundity and information creation without debt was a direct existential threat to the emerging debt money banking systems of northern Italy. It challenged the very idea of private monopoly central banking, which thrived on scarcity and charging interest. Bruno's vision was an open system of limitless creation, where value could be generated endlessly. While Venice, as we'll get into, operated on a closed system model, fixed wealth, inherent debt. So what does this mean for the financial elite? It meant their entire business model, built on scarcity control and debt, was philosophically challenged by Bruno's very existence and the ideas he was spreading.
Which brings us nicely to Venice, a truly unique maritime empire that, according to Farrell, was the world's first virtual economy. Unlike land-based empires, Venice had almost no agricultural land, so its survival and prosperity were founded entirely on trade. This made it live in perpetual fear that its vital trade routes might be severed. Its whole existence was precarious, which forced a unique and, frankly, often ruthless approach to power.
Its approach to trade was famously amoral. They would buy and sell anything to anyone, right? Even war materials and slaves to Byzantium's enemies. Pragmatism above all else. Their distinct Byzantine look and feel, even, solidified by the legendary theft of St. Mark's body from Alexandria. It all speaks to a unique, self-serving strategy. They prized independence from both Rome and other European powers. They really crafted their own identity and their own rules.
And the Golden Bull of 1082 was a huge moment in Venice's rise. It granted it immense trading privileges, practically a monopoly in Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. This naturally led to fierce rivalries with other ambitious Italian maritime powers like Genoa and Pisa. Venice became incredibly adept at navigating these complex geopolitical waters.
And Venice developed this incredibly sophisticated oligarchical playbook to maintain and expand its power. It's like a blueprint for global influence that maybe echoes even today. One key method was balance of power diplomacy. They were masters at playing powerful rivals against each other through the fomenting of endless conflict. You see this in their shifting alliances during the War of the League of Cambrai, where they'd strategically align and realign just to ensure no single power could dominate. They thrived on chaos, didn't they? Because it allowed them to be the constant, indispensable broker.
Oh, absolutely. They also covertly exacerbated religious divisions. Think about this. The printing press, this revolutionary new technology, was used by Venice to disseminate both Catholic and Protestant writings. They fueled the fires of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. Why? Because instability and division in the rest of Europe served Venetian interests. Furthermore, remarkably, Gasparo Cardinal Contarini, a Venetian cardinal, adopted a basically Lutheran position in his theological writings and even helped midwife the Jesuit order into existence. And Thomas Cromwell, Henry VIII's chief advisor in England, reportedly worked for a Venetian merchant. It suggests really deep penetration into foreign courts.
And the strategic decision here, according to the source, was truly audacious to transfer the headquarters of their financial oligarchy northward under the cover of deliberately exacerbated religious tensions. This eventually culminated in the devastating 30 Years' War. It seems like it was a calculated long-term move to shift their base of operations and wealth away from the vulnerable Mediterranean, using religious strife as a smokescreen for a major financial migration. That's quite a plan.
It is. And another crucial part of their playbook was the systematic suppression of knowledge and intelligence, alongside the strategic deployment of disinformation. The Council of Ten, for instance, was the notorious nerve center of Venetian power. It combined foreign policy, legislation, trials, intelligence gathering, counterintelligence, disinformation campaigns, and even assassination. Farrell states it very bluntly. Terrorism was an official state policy. This was not some benevolent republic we're talking about.
And then there was the grain office, the Camerfumenti, which functioned as a kind of Swiss bank to the financial elite of Venice. It was also the primary financial agent to the Council of Ten, handling vast sums and sensitive transactions. Curiously, its archives are completely lost, which makes you wonder, right? What secrets, what evidence of covert operations and financial manipulations might have been held within those missing records? It's a gaping hole in the historical record, and Farrell finds that highly suspicious.
This leads us directly to their closed system economic philosophy, a view of the world that directly contrasted with Bruno's. This philosophy was articulated by Gianmaria Ortiz, a Venetian monk described as the first modern econophysicist. His core arguments were basically that the national economy is a matter which cannot be improved, and that wealth accumulation is essentially wealth privation. There can be no creation of wealth. All wealth involves debt. It's a zero-sum game.
This is truly fascinating because it contrasts so directly, so diametrically, with Bruno's fecundity principle, that idea of continuous, debt-free information and value creation. What's compelling here is the direct connection between this closed, static, equilibrium, zero-summed model of physics and finance and why Venice, specifically, would promote it. It justified their model of control, didn't it? Scarcity, accumulation, where their gain necessarily meant someone else's loss, and where debt was the fundamental lever of power.
Exactly. Now let's explore how this profound philosophical metaphor, the metaphor of the medium, was essentially monetized and twisted, leading to the financial systems we recognize today. We need to connect back to its two distinct interpretations, one of inherent fecundity and one of fundamental debt. This is where theology and finance really intertwine.
Okay, so the source explains primordial debt theory from certain Vedic texts, which states, "In being born, every being is born as debt owed to the gods." This interpretation fundamentally transforms the metaphor from one of fecundity, what the source calls the corn god, a deity of abundance and growth, to one of debt, guilt, and sacrifice, the blood god, a deity requiring payment and appeasement. This isn't just a philosophical shift, it's a profound metaphysical reorientation, isn't it?
It really is. And what's crucial to understand is that the topological mathematical physics view of the metaphor, in its pure form, implies absolutely no notion of debt at all. The universe is seen as inherently abundant and self-generating. The shift to debt was a religious and metaphysical financial language that served a very specific purpose, to create elite powers, institutions, and authority structures. Which raises the obvious question. Who benefits from this interpretation of a primordial debt? Well, clearly, those who then claim the exclusive right to manage, forgive, or enforce that debt, whether they are religious or financial institutions.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The doctrine of corporate personhood. A concept absolutely fundamental to our modern world, but it actually began not in legal theory, but in theology. This is a subtle but incredibly powerful insight from Farrell's work. The crux interpretum, literally the interpretive crossroad, was Romans 5.12, particularly the Latin Vulgate's translation, "in whom all have sinned," which apparently differed significantly from the original Greek.
Yes, and that seemingly small linguistic difference had enormous implications. St. Augustine's formulation of original sin as inherited guilt or moral culpability was built on this interpretation. It blurred the distinction between an individual person and a collective nature. Adam's sin, a personal choice, was seen to define the content of all persons' human nature itself. This laid the theological groundwork for the concept of a corporate person, where a group or an entity can be seen as a single, legally unified being defined by a common functional use of the will. It even helps explain, corporate groupthink cultures, where individual morality can sometimes be subsumed by the corporate will.
And the atonement in this theological framework was seen as the payment of an infinite debt, a kind of cosmic transaction that transformed the metaphor from an open system of virtually limitless creation of information into a zero-sum game and a closed system. If God needed a sacrifice to atone for an inherited debt, then the universe itself was predicated on a system of debt and payment, not infinite abundance. This theological model of debt and fixed resources directly paralleled and maybe even justified the economic models that were emerging in financial centers like Venice and Florence.
This theological framework had direct implications for the medieval super companies like the Bardi and Peruzzi of Florence. These weren't just small local businesses, you see. They were semi-permanent partnerships with corporate logos, international in scale, with branches across Europe, though perhaps with narrower capital than modern multinationals. Crucially, in medieval law, shareholders faced unlimited liability for company debts, meaning their personal fortunes were totally on the line. The theological doctrine of shared culpability was still very much active in the legal landscape back then.
So these super companies, they maintained strict familial control, right? With members trained to penetrate state institutions like mints and tax collection. They shrewdly worked within legal constraints, like the church's prohibition on usury, by structuring their profits as gifts or privileges, or by charging exchange rates that effectively disguised interest. They were incredibly sophisticated for their time, really setting the stage for future financial operations and demonstrating how power could be wielded through economic means.
Which brings us to the dramatic collapse of the Florentine super companies, the Bardi and Peruzzi, in the 1340s. Now, the standard story blames Edward III of England's default on his enormous loans incurred during his wars with France. But Hunt's research, cited by Farrell, shows that Edward III's default was actually a pretty small fraction of their overall dealings, maybe 12–13% of the Bardi's losses. This strongly suggests there was a hidden hand at play, doesn't it? A more intricate strategic attack, rather than just a simple royal bankruptcy.
And that hidden hand, according to Farrell, points directly to Venice. Florentine reliance on Venetian ships for grain trade meant Venetian intelligence was faultlessly well-informed of their rivals' operations. Venice knew Florence's vulnerabilities inside and out, its soft underbelly, as the source puts it. This gave them a crucial informational advantage.
Venice also held a dominant position in the bullion exchange trade across Europe and possessed the strategic ability to manipulate gold-to-silver ratios. That's a crucial factor when Florence's international currency was the gold florin. This wasn't just market fluctuation, it was a deliberate strategy. It became a kind of gold versus silver war, and Florence, despite its apparent wealth, was at a severe disadvantage against Venice's manipulative prowess.
What's particularly chilling, I think, is how Venice used geopolitical maneuvers to orchestrate Florence's downfall. They would often ally with Florence in these mini-wars against common enemies. Then they'd concluded a separate peace, leaving the Florentine companies overexposed and financially vulnerable. This wasn't accidental, was it? It strongly suggests a long-term strategy of attack on the value of Florence's money and a deliberate effort to exhaust their financial reserves through protracted, unwinnable conflicts.
And the forensic accounting of the time is fascinating, too. The Peruzzi bankruptcy records were described as mystifying, suggesting more of a charade than a genuine collapse. The family managed to distance itself from the ruin and retain substantial wealth, implying a strategic transfer of assets beforehand. Their secret books housed shareholder accounts, but also apparently contained window dressing to hide true family indebtedness and asset movements. They even played both sides, lending money to both the Kingdom of Naples and its rival, the Kingdom of Sicily, profiting no matter who won. Very Venetian.
Yeah, very. And we see these ancient, insidious financial practices reappearing too. Practices like bullion culling and clipping, where bankers would deliberately remove newness coins freshly minted, heavier coins, or literally shave off bits of bullion from existing coins, then melt them down for profit or export. This artificial manipulation of the money supply and currency value echoed ancient Babylonian methods, apparently, revealing this timeless playbook for financial control. The source strongly suggests Florence was wrong-footed and toppled by the gold glut that gives every indicator of having been orchestrated by the Vipers of Venice. It wasn't just bad luck, it was a calculated financial attack.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suddenly illuminates Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a play about a pound of flesh. It's a profound commentary on the financial ruthlessness, the strategic manipulations, and even the moral ambiguities that were characteristic of Venetian power and banking in that era. Shylock's pursuit of his bond, the fixed nature of his contract. You could see that as a dramatic representation of that closed system mentality.
Okay, and speaking of hidden knowledge, let's shift gears a bit and turn to some truly astounding cartographic anomalies. Maps that suggest a very different understanding of global geography existed centuries before the age of exploration as we normally think of it. Take the Piri Reis map, for example. This Ottoman admiral's map from 1513, supposedly compiled from older sources. It shows something that, by conventional history, had not yet been discovered. Antarctica.
Yes, and not just a vague outline either. The Orontius Finalis map of 1531 also depicted the Terra Australis, Antarctica, with outlines that are startlingly like modern maps. What's even more remarkable is that these depictions suggest ice-free coasts at the time the original source map was drawn. This implies a source map from a much, much earlier epoch, maybe thousands of years ago, before Antarctica was covered by its current ice sheets. It just raises huge questions about advanced ancient civilizations.
Then there are the medieval portolan charts, like the Dulcet Portolano from 1339. These are highly accurate navigational maps of coastlines and ports, but they're a great deal too accurate to have been drawn by medieval sailors with the instruments they had. They show no signs of development for centuries, as if they were just perfect copies of a much older, highly accurate, normal Portolano. They don't show the iterative errors and improvements you'd expect from developing knowledge over time.
Right. This led A.E. Nordenskiöld, a leading scholar in the field of cartography, to a fascinating conclusion. He argued these maps imply a geographic tradition superior to the one represented by Ptolemy, the most famous ancient geographer. He even suggested a pre-Hellenic people with a more advanced science than that of the Greeks, including knowledge of longitude, which was undreamed of by the Greeks. This isn't just about a lost map. It points towards the possibility of a lost ancient civilization with incredibly sophisticated global knowledge.
And this secret knowledge might even extend to Christopher Columbus's famous voyages. Piri Reis's marginal notes on his map are incredibly telling. He states that Columbus possessed a book relating the knowledge of the New World, indicating access to secret knowledge and a secret cartographic tradition that predated his official voyages. It suggests he wasn't just sailing blind, guessing.
Exactly. The book, according to Piri Reis, spoke of an abundance of bullion and gems, which strongly suggests the real purpose of Columbus's voyage was not merely to find a direct route to the Far East, as we're usually told. It was perhaps to find Atlantis, the legendary lands of the Western Sea, and its vast riches specifically, a new source of bullion outside of existing monopolies controlled by Venice and others. This would have been of immense interest to any powerful financial elite.
And this idea is further reinforced by the Martin B. Ham map of 1492. It was drawn before Columbus returned from his first voyage. Yet it shows surprisingly accurate early depictions of the St. Lawrence Seaway in Newfoundland, hundreds of miles of coastline that really shouldn't have been known accurately at that time. It just further suggests pre-existing knowledge of the New World. It challenges the whole narrative of discovery.
So if this knowledge existed, what was Venice's role in its suppression? The hypothesis, which Farrell explores, is that Italian city-states, especially Venice, gained knowledge of the New World from Greek manuscripts and maps. These could have been looted during the Fourth Crusade sack of Constantinople in 1204, or perhaps acquired through Byzantine humanists at the Council of Florence in the early 15th century. Venice was perfectly positioned to acquire such hidden texts.
And why suppress this knowledge for 3 centuries? This is a critical point about power and control, isn't it? The New World represented vast new sources of bullion, which would have utterly ended Venice's virtual monopoly on international bullion trade and east-west commerce. The oligarchical playbook dictates. When knowledge is discovered that for whatever reason can threaten the power of the ruling oligarchy, that knowledge should be suppressed until that ruling elite has positioned itself to take advantage of it, if possible. It's about controlling the flow of information to maintain a monopoly on wealth and power.
Which leads us to the intricate web of power and secret societies that seems to thread through this entire narrative, culminating perhaps in Bruno's fate. Let's revisit the speculation surrounding Bruno. Was he, in some capacity, a Venetian agent, sent out to foment intellectual and religious chaos in Europe? His initial protection during his first Venice visit, his travels through Europe's religious hotspots, which Venice actively sought to exacerbate, and his contact with the powerful Mocenigo family. It certainly suggests the Venetians had a keen interest in him, perhaps as a strategic asset initially.
But then came his betrayal. Bruno revealed to Giovanni Mocenigo his audacious intent to found a secret society, the Giordanists. His goal was to spread his Hermetic philosophy as a new universal religion that would effectively replace both Protestantism and Catholicism. This ambition ran counter to the Venetian agenda of fomenting religious conflict. They wanted chaos, not a new unifying philosophy that might actually bring people together. By exposing their strategy to exploit religious divisions, Bruno became a liability and, according to Farrell, necessitated his elimination. He became a loose end that needed tying up.
And the very public nature of his execution, being burned at the stake in Rome's Campo de' Fiori, was a deliberate act, a message. It sent a more public message to any possible adherents of that nascent society, a brutal deterrent against anyone else attempting to spread such a disruptive, potentially unifying philosophy that threatened the existing power structures. It was a warning shot, loud and clear.
And the mystery continues centuries later with Napoleon Bonaparte. Why did he specifically transport Venetian archives, including Bruno's trial records, to Paris? The source speculates on his Masonic connections. His foreign minister, Talleyrand, was a known Mason, and Napoleon himself apparently had close ties with Grand Orient Freemasonry. Could he have been acquiring documents related to secret societies, their historical operations, their methods of influence, maybe to leverage them for his own imperial ambitions? It's a compelling thought, isn't it?
It is, and the plot thickens even more with Pope Pius IX, Giovanni Cardinal Mastai. He's the pope who famously defined papal infallibility in 1870. Why did he possess papers relating to Bruno's trial among his personal documents? This raises a really important question. It's an unusual specific detail for a pope of the mid-19th century to be personally interested in a 17th century heretic like Bruno, whose case had long been closed. What was the fascination?
And this detail connects to a notorious document, the Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. This was supposedly a Carbonari manifesto from around 1849, the Carbonari being a secret society with Masonic ties. This document detailed ambitious long-term plans to infiltrate the Catholic Church and elect a liberal pope who would then push for radical reforms from within, ultimately to spread the ideas of Freemasonry into the whole world, basically hollowing out the church from the inside.
Right, and the source explores a fascinating, though unconfirmed, story circulated in Germany and apparently within a Philadelphia Masonic lodge of Pius IX's alleged Masonic initiation before he became pope. Now, Cardinal Caro E. Rodriguez, a staunch critic of Freemasonry, refutes it as a calumny, a slander. But the Bavarian Illuminati's known use of code names for locations, for instance, Philadelphia perhaps referring to a European city, not the American one, leaves a slim possibility that this wasn't a geographical lie, but the coded truth. Could this be the real reason for his interest in Bruno's trial papers?
And this intriguing possibility ties into R. Malachi Martin's fictionalized accounts in his controversial novels, like The Bargain and Windswept House. Martin, a former Jesuit, wrote of a supposed secret agreement negotiated by the Vatican with the high Masonic powers of Europe, exchanging financial access for a secret veto on papal candidates, and leading to a church hollowed out from within by members of various secret societies. While fictional, it certainly echoes the anxieties and conspiracies of the time.
So if Pius IX was indeed an initiate, his fascination with Bruno takes on a new, much deeper light, perhaps one initiate in another, examining the fate of a fellow traveler, or maybe a pioneer of a new spiritual order that predated later Masonic influence. If not, his subsequent conservatism and staunch anti-Masonic stance, especially after his temporal power was stripped away, could be seen as a grave concern for the very secret societies that were challenging the church from within and without. Maybe he saw it as a final manifestation of the Giordanistas sweeping Italy and pushing for radical change. It's a compelling if unsettling thought, and it suggests that this struggle for control of knowledge and power continued long, long after Bruno's death.
Wow, what a journey we've been on today. We've traced this deep historical struggle between two really fundamental views of reality, haven't we? The open system of fecundity and endless creation, championed by figures like Giordano Bruno, and the closed system of debt and the zero-sum game, meticulously enforced by entities like the Venetian oligarchy. This philosophical battle played out not just in theological debates, but in the very fabric of finance, economic models, and geopolitical power struggles, with brilliant minds like Bruno tragically caught in the crossfire as powerful forces vied for control.
And this intricate dance between hidden knowledge, economic models, and power structures isn't just dry history. It really is a kind of blueprint. Understanding these historical patterns allows you, the listener, to critically analyze information and question assumptions in your own world. It illuminates how powerful elites might subtly shape narratives to maintain control, whether through economic manipulation, the suppression of disruptive ideas, or the selective reinterpretation of ancient wisdom. It encourages you to look beyond the surface of what you're told.
So, consider this provocative thought as we wrap up today. The source suggests that Babylonian science was thus, perhaps, a heritage from a much older culture. What if the most profound scientific and philosophical insights have always existed, not as new discoveries we stumble upon through linear progress, but as rediscovered ancient wisdom, wisdom deliberately hidden or reinterpreted by those who sought to control its implications for power and wealth? It really makes you wonder what other fundamental truths might be just beneath the surface of what we think we know, waiting to be rediscovered, and what forces might still be working to keep them hidden. Until next time, keep digging deeper.